Rob Manfred. Yes, the 10th baseball commissioner.
Hi.
And let me just say, you look like a commissioner.
Well, I don't know about that.
Seriously. You're like, your suit is more crisp. Your hair is all dialed in. Listen, I wouldn't think the last great unfulfilled American sports story is the Cubs, 1908.
Right.
The Red Sox fulfilled their destiny. American Pharoah won a Triple Crown. Miguel Cabrera won a Triple Crown. LeBron won in Cleveland.
Right.
I would think nothing less of you if you were like sort of rooting for the Cubs. Acknowledge it, Commissioner. It's okay to do that.
Let me do this, okay? I have to acknowledge that the Cubs winning the World Series would be really good for the business of baseball.
Absolutely.
It would, yes, it would.
I like you.
Can we have the most honest thing a commissioner's ever said on my show? Let's hear it for Rob Manfred. No, it would be. Let's listen. Sports is. It was good for the NBA and LeBron, right? Do you talk to other? I want to ask you because baseball has always done so well financially. You've got an innate connection to American history. It was the first big sport, the longest season, the most revenue, the most inventory. Are you ever seduced by when you make crucial decisions? The money is so now great, always has been, greater than ever. You're way ahead on streaming. How hard is it as a commissioner making crucial decisions for the game not to be seduced by the revenue?
You know, I think it's actually fairly easy, or it has been easy for me, to separate business decisions. And, you know, you do have to make big business decisions, things that involve a lot of money, from things that affect the integrity of the play of the game on the field. It's almost like you wear two hats. And on the integrity issues, I honestly have never had a thought about dollars when I was dealing with one of those issues.
I said yesterday to John Smoltz, I said, the NBA says you can't stand there when you play defense. The NFL says you can't move there when you play offense. Hockey, you can't stand in the crease. Right. I would absolutely fully support baseball saying, hey, you second baseman, right side of the bag. Why not, for the good of the television product, the action and the offense, outlaw the defensive shift?
You know what? We are looking more broadly. Let's put I'll come back to the shifts in just a second because it's sort of a hot button with me.
Sure.
But we are looking more broadly and in more depth than I think ever in the time I've been involved in baseball at rules and how they affect what the fans watching on the field. It's something that we have not done enough of over the last probably 20 years. If you look back and you look at all the rule changes in all the other sports, and then you look at all the significant rule changes in Major League Baseball, we kind of have a dearth in there. You know, and that doesn't mean the game hasn't changed. Instead, it means that the game has changed in response to 30 really smart managers and general managers deciding how can I win more out of my 162 games. So it's been a more natural evolution of the game, and we're looking at it very hard. With respect to shifts, you know, I got in trouble on shifts day one. I was doing an interview with another network, and they were asking me about changes I was thinking about, and I didn't want to answer that question, and they kept kind of after me. Finally, I said, you know, one thing I would think about is outlawing defensive shifts. So I have a transparent email, which is a bad thing. You know, you can kind of figure out what my email is still, and I got emails, I mean, just so many of them, about how stupid that suggestion was. I had 2 papers with footnotes that somebody sent in explaining that my desire to outlaw shifts was really a bad idea. So I've always stayed away from that topic ever since.
But Commissioner, it used to be, I imagine, for an owner, the gate receipts were 75% of the commerce.
Right.
The television now is probably closer to 60% of the commerce, streaming.
Right.
Why can't a commissioner simply make decisions based on the quality of the TV product? The NFL changes rules at halftime if the game's better on Fox.
No, I do think that we are beginning a process where we're going to look very hard at how the game is played on the field and examine whether there should be some changes in the rules that make the entertainment product more compelling, particularly from a broadcast perspective.
What is your greatest challenge?
I think the hardest thing in this job is to balance the need to respect the history and traditions of the game on the one hand, And on the other hand, to recognize that as great an institution as baseball is, and it is a great institution, that it needs to change. It needs to change. It needs to modernize, just like every institution, in order to maintain its relevance. And the difficulty is finding that sweet spot, right, where you do not alienate the traditionalists, and
Right.
yet you move the game forward.
I suggested this yesterday to John Smoltz. I said, listen, the game's more global than ever. It really is. People talk about basketball's globalization. Football's largely a domestic product. You come from our college system. Baseball, it is Asian players all over the globe. And I said, some of those players don't go through. They're so gifted. A Cuban player comes here, he can play day one. He is so gifted. They don't go through the minor league system. They don't figure out, they're not told how to play the game. I do see at times a rift between older veteran players and often even a Bryce Harper who didn't go through a minor league system. Have you addressed that with some of your players and managers?
Yeah, we've been talking about this a lot during the course of the year. I think some of Bryce's comments early in the season certainly got them going. The way I think about it's this: 20 years ago, let's just pick an era, right? Yeah. The players, there's certain rules of the game that are written down, and the game's always going to be played within the context of those rules. But we all know, particularly in baseball, there's always been unwritten rules.
Sure.
20 years ago, players decided what those unwritten rules were going to be. What was acceptable, what was unacceptable, and, it's a process. Right. But everybody kind of gets there. They learn them. They figure out what they are. I think what you're seeing out there is that this generation's going to do the same thing, okay? The rules, the unwritten run, are going to be different because this generation's different.
Sure.
And that's a good thing. Yeah. I know they're going to use good judgment. I know that they'll get to a set of rules that make sense for our game, but they're going to be a little different than the ones that were in vogue 20 years ago, and that's how it should be. It's their game. The game belongs to the players that are playing it today, and they're going to set those rules.
If Roger Goodell could snap his fingers, he would probably eliminate the CTE story in the narrative. If you could snap your fingers, what's a headache you'd like to just push off the table?
Oh, I think that the most nagging headache for any sport is performance-enhancing drugs. Yeah. Our approach with this, and it's taken a long time to get kind of to equilibrium, is we feel we have the very best testing program in professional sports. The World Anti-Doping Agency seems to agree with us. We do 22,000 drug tests a year. We catch players. We catch low-profile players. We catch high-profile players.
I had a player tell me he was tested 8 times last year. NFL guys are not tested 8 times. Brady's not been tested, whether it's the inflation of the ball. So players have told me that it is rigorous.
Yeah, it is very, very rigorous, but we are also realistic about it. There is no, we solved that problem. It just doesn't exist because there's always new things out there, new technology, new temptations for players, and you just have to stay vigilant on the issue, and you're going to have little episodes where you have a series of positives or whatever, but it's a reality of sport, and we think we're in a very realistic position. We feel like we're doing everything we can to combat it, but we never feel self-satisfied that we solved the problem.
Rob Manfred is the 10th Major League Baseball commissioner, officially January of 2015 last year. Adam Silver's the new commissioner. I've always had this at almost an Illuminati level that you commissioners have this lunch in Midtown Manhattan once a year, and you ask for the back table, and you're like, listen, Roger, you dole out punishment. You dole out punishment, see if it works. Silver, you embrace gambling. Bettman, you move a team to Vegas first. I have this, I've always said, these guys all talk to the 4 biggest people in sports. Do you ever sit down with other commissioners?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I had a little sit down with both Adam and Roger last week.
Last week?
Yeah.
Where'd you go?
We happened, and Gary, actually, I sat with all 3 of them. We were all in Sun Valley at the same time, at the same conference, and, we found an opportunity, not the 4 of us, but me with each of the individuals, and I know they met with each other as well, to just sit down and talk We have a set of common interests and problems.
Sure.
And, particularly at the beginning, Adam's transition was very much like mine. Really long time commissioner.
Right.
Kind of everybody knew Adam was the guy for a while,
Yes.
even though David was still there. I had a similar situation.
Right.
And I've said this before publicly. He was tremendously helpful to me in terms of figuring out what that transition should look like and how to make it as successful as his was.
Well, I think he's uniquely progressive. He embraced gambling almost his first week. Maybe I'm a little less prone to be outraged by gambling because I spent 7 years in Vegas. But I've always argued that if it increases engagement, it's not terrible for sports. Where do you fall on, for the record, an increasingly gambling-centric society in your sport?
Well, look, I think that gambling is one of those balance issues for sports, right? You have to have a set of rules for players. Okay, let's talk about players first, or people involved in the actual play of the game that protect the integrity of the sport. There can never be any hint that gambling has somehow encroached on those who actually determine the outcome of the contest.
Right.
On the other hand, it's hard to ignore that things like fantasy, which I guess at least some people see as a form of gambling,
Sure.
That it increases fan engagement, and that's really important. I mean, fans have huge entertainment alternatives out there.
Of course,
and I think you need to be realistic about the need to use the tools of engagement to keep your sport popular. Now, the trick there, I think, is appropriate regulation of gambling. Obviously, illegal gambling, I don't think anyone can make the argument, can be a very dangerous thing for sports to be anywhere near. I think the things that Adam has said about the need for comprehensive federal regulation in gambling are really correct.
Right. And with that, it would the natural segue is, do you have any relationship with Pete Rose? I mean, he works for us, and I think he's wildly entertaining, but he's always in the news, and I have to ask a baseball commissioner.
Well, I'll be honest with you. Pete came in to see me as part of the process. We actually spent a couple of hours together. I found him to be interesting.
Oh, he is, yeah.
I thought he was candid, which is a nice trait in a human being. I think he told me the truth.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. And I hope one thing that people realize about me, I'm not a grudge holder, or that because you have an interaction with someone that's difficult or uncomfortable, that necessarily means you can't have a relationship with that person going forward. And I sort of feel that way about Pete. I mean, I recognize Pete is one of the great stories in the history of our game.
He was the most popular player when I was 15.
Hey, a year ago, I was in Cincinnati. I mean, it's hard to miss that. We were in Cincinnati for the All-Star Game a year ago. And, look, there's just people absolutely devoted to Pete Rose. He had tremendous accomplishments on the field. I had to make a hard decision that I still believe it was correct based on the need to protect the integrity of the sport.
Sure. Rob Manfred, baseball's commissioner, now joining us in the Hurricanes in San Diego, which is an absolutely beautiful ballpark and a city perfectly built for an All-Star game. I think increasingly, I have submitted to my audience that the Pro Bowl is now an eyesore. It's embarrassing for the NFL. I think the NBA All-Star Game is played out. Your All-Star Game is the last one that matters. There is, though, increasingly, all commissioners are dealing with a reality. Players now sign $200 million contracts. They don't sense a need for an All-Star Game. And pitchers, increasingly, can make a very compelling argument. I'm more important to my Nationals than I am at an All-Star Game. Do you ever think it's possible, how possible, Commissioner, that you may have to at some point, for the integrity of the All-Star Game, put your foot down on who pitches, who plays, and who doesn't? Because increasingly, all commissioners are facing this.
It's interesting. The rules on the All-Star Game in terms of participation were changed in exactly the direction you suggest during the last CBA, and I I suspect you may see more of it. And, our All-Star Game is important to us for two reasons. Number one, it really is the best of the All-Star Games.
Yes.
I think it's hard to, I don't, you sounds braggy, whatever.
No, it is.
But,
Yeah.
I think it's hard to debate that.
The Cubs could get home field in the series tonight.
Right. And I do think the fact that it's played for something matters.
Right.
I mean, that idea that, frankly, was a Fox baseball collaboration in terms of, putting meaning in the game, I think was a really good change and one that's helped make the game important. The third point about our All-Star Game is, our postseason is different. We can't schedule the World Series in Phoenix,
Right.
whatever the date is in February, whatever, like they do the Super Bowl. We're going to play it in the markets where those fans have cheered for those teams all year long, and that's the way it should be. And as a result, the All-Star Game, like you see here in San Diego, is our best opportunity to showcase the sport. And we need to make sure that game continues to be a really compelling entertainment product in order for that showcase to matter.
Rob Manfred, Fox has a new show called Pitch.
Right.
Have you seen it by chance?
Yeah, we actually, I have not seen any of the episodes.
It's going to be a hit.
We talked about them, or talked with them about the show early on. They came in and saw us. We helped them get access in terms of, stadiums and whatnot. And I've heard really good things about it.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
Like, people will cry watching. If it is interesting, the storyline's fascinating. That a woman makes the bigs, and it wouldn't be realistic if you said she throws 120.
Right.
She develops a pitch
Right.
that nobody else has. And I grew up, the Necros threw the knuckleball.
Right.
Charlie Huff was at a Dodger pitcher. Somebody else threw the knuckleball.
Charlie Huff was a knuckleballer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am for quirky. I like Bryce Harper's hair. I love Yasiel Puig. Bryce Harper did this make baseball fun again. I also suggested, I said, what's wrong with Rob Manfred saying, listen, I'm going to make Bryce Harper the face of baseball. Would you be uncomfortable picking a player or two and building a campaign around him?
Well, no, not uncomfortable picking, a handful of players and building a campaign around them. I think that it's one of the things that we're working hard at. We have an amazing generation right now, right, that's come into the game in terms of talent.
Yes.
Bryce Harper, Chris Bryant, Clayton Kershaw, you did Mike Trout. You don't want to leave anybody out. Andrew McCutchen, Jose Fernandez.
Machado at Baltimore, amazing.
Yeah, I mean, just really great players. And we think that the great young players that have kind of emerged all at the same time provide us a real opportunity with young people.
Right.
Because we think a Bryce Harper or a Manny Machado, a little more appealing than somebody
He was on the show yesterday. It was fantastic.
Yeah, a little more appealing than somebody who's 39
Sure.
and on their way to playing a lot of golf. So it is a real opportunity for the sport, and I think one we need to make the most out of.
So are you struggling with the FBI's decision not to do D.B. Cooper anymore? Because I'm struggling. That doesn't bother you at all, does it?
No, I actually remember that story very vividly. I really do. It was it's one of those stories that, kind of gets in your head and it's hard to get it out, right?
Yeah.
What happened to that guy?
Nobody knows. They found everything but the guy.
Yeah.
So it's going to ruin my day. You don't have to worry
Colin.
about that.
I'm going to get through the day without
Didn't you make your day right here? This is a great
this
interview.
made my day, but
Should
when
make
you
it all
leave,
better.
it's D.B. Cooper in my head for the next 7 hours.
geez.
There you go.
Absolute pleasure to have you, Commissioner.
Oh, it's great to be here. I really enjoyed it.